Good morning, everyone. So we are prepared to start. If I can call everyone's attention. Thank you all for being here. So again, good morning. I am James Singletary, and I'm the inaugural executive director for Save Harlem Now. Yes, we can get a little applause. Thank you for that. And I'm uber excited and delighted to be here to take this journey with you all today. The Save Harlem Now Board of Directors and the support of the Ford Foundation Center for Social Justice and we are excited, and we have put together an impressive ensemble of players for today that features architects, activists, academicians, authors, advocates, historians, Harlemites, developers, and preservationists, to bring to you a dynamic conference that we hope will compel each of you and your organizations to unite with Save Harlem Now in this great work. We hope to share the insights to inspire, to educate, to encourage each of you to act and join us as we seek to preserve Harlem's history and heritage, to secure more designations, to close the preservation gap that threatens Harlem's existence, leaving it exposed for the consumption by over-aggressive developers. Our mission at Save Harlem Now is to protect, preserve, and celebrate Harlem's irreplaceable built heritage. For us, that includes individual structures, landscapes, and other elements, as well as our culture that defines the sense of place and its undeniable character that Harlem is. Harlem holds an incredibly special place locally, nationally, and globally, dating back to the Great Migration, to the Harlem Renaissance, that brought with it a new spirit of pride, social consciousness, self-determination, and renewed commitment to political activism that is still with us today. We all know that it is no place in the world quite like Harlem, yes? Yes. I would say amen, but we're not at church. It stands out because of its rich history and legacy, and it is the site of many significant African-American cultural and political accomplishments during the early part of the 20th century, and as such, it has been named most appropriately the Black Mecca. As members of the Harlem community and the African diaspora, we are the gatekeepers, we are the menders, we are the stewards of our own history and our legacy. And consequently, we have both the duty and the responsibility to preserve Harlem. And more than that, I am convinced that we have a divine mandate to remember and a moral obligation to roll up our sleeves, to raise our voices, and to rally communities and other stakeholders to unite around the collective charge to preserve Harlem. When we preserve Harlem, we preserve history. When we preserve Harlem, we preserve hope. When we preserve Harlem, we preserve a sense of pride in our African-American heritage. When we preserve Harlem, we preserve homes, schools, churches, businesses. When we preserve Harlem, we preserve families, and we preserve community. And lastly, we preserve culture. So on behalf of the Save Harlem Now and Madam President Valerie Jo Bradley and the Board of Directors, we welcome you all here to our inaugural conference, Saving This Place, a call to action for preserving Harlem. Welcome. Thank you. At this time, I would like to introduce someone that needs no introduction, really, since we are all in his house. Amen. Oh, I said the amen. If you don't know, I am an ordained clergy person, so I can't help it. But I want to introduce to you Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation and the Center for Social Justice. And I'm sure, as I said, many of you may know Darren. If you don't know him personally, like me, you more than likely have heard his name, or you know who he is by the virtue of the great work that he has been doing, and by his passion for service and social justice. And I read that under Darren's leadership, the Ford Foundation became the first nonprofit in the United States history to issue $1 billion social bond designated to stabilizing nonprofit organizations during the COVID pandemic. Yes? So Darren has an impressive resume and a long list of accomplishments throughout his body of work as a servant leader. and continues his work and commitment by serving on various boards, including the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you none other Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Ford Foundation. I am so thrilled, exhilarated by this occasion. First, to my beloved friend, Valerie Joe Bradley. Now, I must tell you that I met this woman in 1995 at an event. I think it was maybe a Block Association event, because Valerie was an organizer of the Block Associations. And I lived on 120th Street between Lenox and 7th. And the block looked a little different. And it was a time when progress on our block was just reducing the number of crack vials, the colorful crack vials that used to line the brownstone stoops on my block. And I remember meeting Valerie, and what I saw in her was someone who believed with every fiber of her body, in Harlem, and in her community, and a determination to see things through. And she was such an inspiration to me and to so many other people in that community during what were difficult days. And so, Valerie, it is so great to see you now in this role, doing the work that you are called to do, and we need you to do. Save Harlem Now, the mission is urgent. The mission is essential. And for me, this is deeply personal, because so much of what this organization is about is, yes, it is about Harlem, but it is about a bigger phenomenon. And that is a realization that communities like Harlem are America's cultural treasures, that we have not appreciated the full richness of community that is worthy of preservation. And many of you are preservationists. I have been so fortunate to be a part of the National Trust African American Historic Heritage Action Fund, which the gentleman you are about to hear from has been an integral part of. But that emerged out of a realization that historic preservation in this country had not done its job. The historic preservation movement in America has failed to fully internalize its mission to preserve, to educate this country about its history that is worthy of preservation. And so the work that you are all doing is so important today. And I just want to thank you for us at the Ford Foundation to, James, you can always have the house. It's not a problem, okay? It's not a problem. We are so happy. Days like this just give me just immense, enormous joy. I'm just so grateful for your work, your commitment, your service, your leadership. Whether you are working in Harlem or other communities, this country needs you. Our democracy needs you. We need you to educate. We need you to tell the full story of the communities that make up the fabric of this nation, and the communities especially that have been underinvested in and overlooked. And with your work, we are going to turn the tide. It's such an honor for me to introduce Irvin M. Henderson, because, as I said, one of my great joys these last few years has been in co-founding the African American Heritage Action Fund at the National Historic Trust. And I give Brett Leggs enormous credit for his singular leadership in making this happen. But Irvin has been a critical part, a cheerleader, a contributor, a person who continued during times when people didn't want to hear his story, the stories that he was telling about communities, Black communities across this country, worthy of preservation, worthy of celebration, and worthy of investment. And so, Irvin, I know you are going to have good words for us. And since James has set us off in a church, I thank you and say amen and welcome you, Irvin M. Henderson.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I am humbled by such a collection of preservationists and folks that care. And I have to say that I am simply going to try to do the best I can to kick off what is an incredible program dealing with all of the issues that absolutely need to be dealt with. And I can't tell you how impressed I am with the group of speakers and leaders that you all have assembled for today. And it is totally my pleasure, Darren, to be in the house. And we'll have a little church this morning. It's going to be all right. I have to thank you so much for your great introduction. And let me say right up front how much the preservation movement is indebted to you and the Ford Foundation for the great work that you all are doing in preservation. It is nothing short of amazing, and we owe so much to you and Ms. Felicia Richard for all the work and guidance that you have given as co-chairs of the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund. Now, we named it that, but that is a mouthful. And each word is so important. I remember when we were trying to shorten it, we couldn't, because each word was simply too important. My thanks also to James Singletary. And James, I'm going to make sure I don't speak after you no more. I'm going to make sure of that. But as ED of Save Harlem now, we are indebted to you as well for the incredible work. And Valerie Jo Bradley, chairing, giving, volunteering. As board chair of Save Harlem now, your work is so important to this entire movement and so important to this very, very important community. And then Roberta Washington, the guidance, the structuring, the hand-holding, very, very important. Angel and others were involved as well, and I want to thank all of them. These are board members and preservationists that helped me get oriented for this very important event. So, with no further ado, let us talk preservation. When we talk about Harlem and when we talk about preservation, most folks come at it from a different bent. They like to talk about the importance of the artifacts, the importance of the architecture. All these things are extremely important. But my colleagues here from the National Trust, M. Tamanika Youngblood, former vice chair, Marita Rivera, former chair, they will tell you that my mantra was always about preservation as an economic development tool, not just the importance of historic preservation, but the importance of using preservation to develop our communities. Preservation is always about places, but also people. Things get on the National Register. Edifices get on the National Register because of the importance of its architectural approach, but more importantly, because of the things that occurred in those buildings. So much of African American preservation is about the people in those buildings. And every time I look at that picture with all of the leaders of Harlem coming together, it gives me pause, because that is what we're going to have to do to make preservation happen. In order to save Harlem now, that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to come together. Preservation is dynamic. It is intentional. It is detailed. And it is super if you love old buildings. When we study those things that tell us about the histories here, and we find pictures like these, we know that folks have been concerned about these elements for years. So we stand on some great shoulders, and that means that we've got a lot of good work to do. When we look at the beautiful structures and the architecture that is so special, then we recognize that we've got twin-fisted approaches: the architecture, the people, the places, the times, the events. Throughout the history, throughout the things that we know we've saved that we love. You know, Darren, I can't help but think back to a special situation that you orchestrated for us, where we had a private concert from Wynton Marsalis on the stage of the Apollo. I get chills now as I'm saying it, you know. And it was about preservation. It was about the launch of the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund, but it was also about jazz. And it was about the importance of jazz in this history. Many of the places I will tell you about that we are preserving have a jazz connection, a good jazz connection. So when we talk about Renaissance, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? It is the arc of recovery. It is the arc of refresh. It is the arc of rising up and renewing, rebuilding and revitalizing, dreaming and planning for a bright future. We're going to talk a lot about dreaming. So from the people, what do the folks say? What do the folks say about their neighborhoods? What are the things that they talk about when they say, we can get behind this? These are the things they talk about. They want safety. They want to be able to walk their neighborhoods. They ask, why is Harlem different? Don't we deserve the American way? They want equity. They want preservation from an Afrocentric development point of view. Now, Afrocentric is not away from Americana. Afrocentric is a huge component of Americana, just as Darren and others have said. So what we're looking for is our happiness in celebrating those things that are ours and those things that will edify us into the future. You know, there's a connection between the past and the future. You know, when you get grandchildren, you understand that a little differently. And I have a 21-year-old grandson and a 2-year-old grandson, and one that is 6 months in the incubator and 3 months from being here. So that changed the way I thought about life. I remember a few years ago I said to myself, what I think I have done is I think I've launched my sons. And I only have sons, couldn't make a girl to save my life. I don't have anything to worry about because my sons are going to be all right. And then they started having children, and I went, oh, God, you know, more stuff to worry about. So you can't give up on America. You can't give up on our world, because the future comes, and these folks deserve the future that we can give them. So we want to control things, right? We want to control our destiny. We want to make sure that the future has history and preservation as an economic engine. These are the tools that we put together when we build community, when we build neighborhoods, okay? We've got to deal with the education and learning aspects, not just for the kids and the young folks. Lifelong learning, lifelong appreciation of these goals, of these elements, is a part of what we must do. And yeah, you got to have the capital. Somebody said to me just the other day, why is capital so important? I just shook my head. I went, what are you going to do without capital? And I think they thought I was giving them a flippant answer. But without the capital to support our dreams, what are we going to do? Now, when we talk about preservation in Harlem, we're talking a lot about small business. We're talking about small businesses that can thrive from preservation as an economic engine, but also small businesses that support this effort, support it in a meaningful way. And you notice I said small business. Now that's nonprofit and for-profit. The only distinction is your tax-exempt status, not your economic strategy. Quality jobs? Yeah, preservation creates a lot of jobs. A lot of folks don't get that. One of the reasons why we can use things like new market tax credits with historic tax credits is because we create a lot of jobs in preservation. And then finally, preservation speaks to health. I'm going to talk to you about some buildings that we're doing where the health aspects of those who will be in those buildings was as important as the preservation aspects of the cultural historic fabric. Putting those two things together gives you what? A great building. So when we talk about a community development system for Harlem or any neighborhood, these are the things that have to exist, right? You've got to have opportunities for all of the households. So it's not just affordable housing, it's everything else. It's having schools that are performing, alternate education. You know, everybody doesn't do well in a classroom. My oldest boy is a perfect example. Brilliant kid, an author. He writes high fantasies. Never felt good in a classroom. Never enjoyed the classroom milieu, if you will. So alternate education becomes so very important for us. Digital and live communication. You know, so much of what we do when we talk to folks now is not like this, which is why this intimate setting is so cool today. I really, really like this room. It's you know, you can command this room fairly easily. Entertainment and recreation, well, I don't mean any harm, but Aunt Hagee's children like to party. You know, we enjoy celebrating, and we are a celebratory people, and if you can't get with that, then maybe you don't know the Boogaloo. The essence of our communities, the essence of how we keep the development that we've done in our communities going is through preservation and the arts. Once again, my trust colleagues have heard me say this before. The heart and soul of our communities is about preservation and the arts. When you do a redevelopment of an area and you bring out the preservation aspects and you celebrate the arts, everybody in the community gets it. And they protect those spaces and those places more than they would if we were simply talking economics. So it's an essential part of a community development system. Now, something else we know about Harlem, still in some of the borough and some of the neighborhoods, is that you don't have those essential services. You don't have essential retail. And sometimes we have retail that we don't even want. But what we're looking for is how can folks in the neighborhood have everything that they need? There should be no food deserts. There should be no areas where you cannot simply do the normal things you expect to do in any neighborhood of America, because this is our neighborhood. So the how, right? Collaboration is key. I'm truly, where's James? I am truly preaching to the choir, because you are here to collaborate, and we know you understand this, but there's a role for you to play. Each one of you knows 10 important people who could have and should have been here this morning and who we need to save Harlem now. And that's your role when you leave here, is to go get those 10. Promise them a muffin or something, I don't know, whatever would work, but get them to sit down with you long enough to talk about, well, this is why I came to that meeting. This is why I'm aligning with that nonprofit. This is why I'm trying to help save Harlem now. There are a few things that I've been able to use and that I've championed, and that more importantly, others have championed, whereby we were able to make a difference. So what we're talking about is the ability to select certain very important buildings, certain very important neighborhoods, get the access to capital, and develop those areas. A zoning tool that you all may want to use in some areas is to do an overlay district where you totally control what else can happen alongside some of your most important preservation jewels. That overlay district is something you can do with planning and zoning, and very often folks say, well, you're being restrictive. No, we're preserving. That's all we're doing, is we're preserving. There are several community anchors that we have got to make sure get the assistance that they need to grow. Save Harlem Now is one of those community anchors. You all know several others. We've got to make sure that the support is there as they continue to try to go forward. People first initiatives, like what is being done here with the Center for Social Justice. You want to support those because they support preservation. You must have an atmosphere of support in order for preservation, to persist, because preservation is not easy. And most people think it's more expensive than it is. Doesn't have to be, but you've got to have that atmosphere. We want training that creates real jobs and business opportunities. When we say small business is a big part of preservation, it's because we know we can create some very, very good jobs. We want Harlem first concepts and resolutions at all levels of government that support Harlem first concepts. Now, you have some great, powerful politicians in this city that can help you with that. It's our job to make it first on their agenda. Now, there's been a lot over the last few years about corporate responsibility and how corporations can be very supportive. There's been a whole lot more talk than there's been action. You all know that. You're at the epicenter of the talk. You can be at the epicenter of the action. It's going to take more advocacy from us. That's why we also talk about leadership development. We can't get the advocates out there. We can't grow the advocates without developing some of our leaders. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we are accomplishing that are important around the country. You all have the very gorgeous Masonic Temple here. Around the country, there are several Masonic temples. I am fortunate to be able to work on several of these buildings. In Birmingham, you have the Masonic Temple that was done by the Prince Hall Masons of Alabama. You're talking about a building that was designed by Robert Robinson Taylor, the first certified African-American architect in this country and the first graduate of MIT's School of Architecture. You're talking about a building designed in 21, built in 22 and 23, opened in 24 for $859,000. Not one scintilla of debt. All equity raised by men who were making between $5 and $7 a week. Quarters, nickels, and dimes that led to one of the most important buildings in Birmingham and one of the first high-rises in Birmingham. An excellent edifice and something that I wanted to make sure you all knew about. Now, one of your own sons, Carlton Brown, is the principal for Direct Invest Development. And Carlton is my partner on this particular building. We are historic district developers for this particular building. And what we anticipate is a $29.8 million restoration. Now, the first thing you say is, well, how are you going to raise all that money? That's what my wife asks me all the time. In this particular case, we're using new market tax credits, historic tax credits, support from the city, but we're doing a capital campaign with Birmingham's brightest and greatest leaders to raise $9 million in corporate capital campaign capital. That's what it takes to make a building like this come back. Huntley Hall, Virginia Union University. Virginia Union really wanted to do this building up in an incredible way because it's got great architecture and it has a current need to serve the students there. That's why this vision was developed by my team and I. Historic Fountain Hall, Morris Brown College. Now, you want to talk about a building that I feel so humbled to be involved with at all. This is the place where much of the march the marches, the Freedom Riders, the essence of the civil rights movement. This is the building where many of those plans began and the work to implement them began. But on the second floor, as you come off the stairwell and move to the right, you come to the former office of W.E.B. Du Bois. You stand at, I got a picture of this, of me standing at his desk looking out. Now, my mom, who passed in March at 95, was very hard to impress. My older grandson, who I told you was in college, very hard to impress. I showed them both that picture and they said, "Oh, this is a big deal." And I said, "Oh my God, I finally have done it." I finally got both of them from both perspectives. But this is where he wrote The Souls of Black Folk. Now, if we don't preserve this building, I'm going to kick my own butt. I'm sorry? Well, I don't have it today, but I tell you what I'll do, and I thank you for asking for it. I will send it to James, and James will make it available for all of you. But more importantly, and your name? Ms. Duzant, one of the things I want you to do is I want you to come when we finish this building, and I want you to come to that second floor because that space is going to be velvet roped, and it will be a place where people can do special things like swear in judges, marry their loved one. It's going to be a very special place, and I want you to come and experience it because you asked for the picture. Absolutely. Now, this is in Chicago. This is the ICA Greenrise Center. I've already finished phase 1. We're doing phase 2 and 3. Many times in preservation, you can't do it in one phase. You just can't raise enough money. So you get done what you can get done, and then you move over and do the rest. This was the old Kemper Insurance Building, and this is a picture from 32. This building was donated to the Institute of Cultural Affairs in '71. And many of the systems here are original systems. I'm talking about the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing. If you're going to bring these buildings back, the guts of the building, the systems of the building have to be redone. And we're doing the same kind of raising of funds, historic tax credits, both state and federal, okay? New market tax credits, and a lot of philanthropy as well, and a senior note that is being underwritten by the Community Investment Corporation of Chicago, a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution. Sometimes those big banks, y'all have a lot of them here. We have a lot of them in North Carolina. We are the 2 banking centers of our country. Sometimes the big banks won't invest in preservation. Well, it's too risky, this, that, or the other. Never as risky as some of the other stuff that they fund every day. And so consequently, what we've got to do is say to them that preservation is worth funding. Now, I wanted to show you this to show you how far and wide you must go to support preservation. This is a new building that I did in Hilo, Hawaii, and it is a job creation center. And very much the development fees from this building is what supported some of the buildings that you just saw. In other words, as a developer, I took the fees from doing new construction and helped me support the pre-development of historic preservation construction. You got to figure it out. You got to figure it out. Now, this is Pittsburgh, where we're doing an entire block. In the middle, you see the New Granada Theater, where Duke Ellington in '32 was first referred to as the King of Jazz on a radio program. Now here, you've got everybody from Ella to Count Basie, Nina Simone, almost anyone you can name as an historic artist performed at the New Granada. It was part of the, yes, Chitlin Circuit. Some of y'all know about that. But these were the places where you could play to audiences of our people with artists of our people. An incredible structure. The New Granada Theater was designed by Louis Bellinger, who just happened to work with Robert Robinson Taylor to put together the first group of African-American architects who allied themselves. The rest of the block, all the way down the end, 40 units of artist preferenced housing. That is complete. The last building to the right is complete. In the middle are the offices of our partner, which is the Hill District Community Development Corporation. Next to it is the actual New Granada, and next to it is a new office building that we are building as well. This entire block is $72 million of development. I don't mind telling you, preservation takes a long time. The vision for this project started in 2011. We are in construction now. We're in construction now. All right. So here we are. These are the kind of things that we're trying to achieve with this block. It is about the arts and culture, it's about the preservation, but it's also about the social equity, the economic development aspects of how this works. Very, very important as we look forward to understand how all these elements come together and produce the kind of preservation that you want in your neighborhoods. National significance here, this was a national treasure designation by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. It certainly received a grant from the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund, and it will be a part of national heritage tours as we go forward. You actually see some of the artists performing in the old building as you look at those pictures, and you see the original Pythian temple architect, Louis Bellinger. Now, to just emphasize the collaboration that it takes for a block like that, all of the folks you see there were involved. All of them came together to make this happen. And as we move forward, you're going to build similar coalitions here to make the difference here that you want to make. Just give you a little bit of the program. We'll have a food hall and retail spaces on the first floor. We'll have a black box theater that will certainly be something used by the community, but everything from spoken word to local drama will be done here. Now, the second floor is where we'll have the main event space, and as you see, 926 seats. These seats will be movable so that we actually can use it for corporate events. So you're talking about a 16-hour environment. Now, this is very important when we talk about preservation. You may not be able to pay for a building if you don't have it being used almost all the time. So that means Tuesday afternoon, you got the corporate stuff. Friday, you may have, a new hip-hop artist. Saturday, you may have a jazz artist. On Sunday, you may have a coalition of churches meeting in the building. You've got to do everything every day, and that's how we make this stuff work. An outdoor plaza, the rooftop, dining venue, all those kind of things to really, really make this stuff happen. Now, in Hartford, in the North End, their most troubled neighborhood, we're doing a Renaissance plan that redevelops the entire neighborhood itself. We're redeveloping brownfields, and we're doing historic preservation of 37 housing units that we've identified in the North End that qualify and should be redeveloped as historic preservation. But in terms of the commercial stuff, we're putting together a new economic development engine. This is a digital inclusion center where we will train folks for the new jobs that are coming, and those new jobs will help us preserve as well. All right. So the challenges that you all see in our communities and see in this community are well known to you. We've got to deal with the zoning problems, gentrification, property taxes, losing our most sacred faith places. Now, the churches of Harlem, you all are going to have to just put your shoulder to the wheel, and you're going to have to make sure that our lay leadership and our pastoral leadership understand the importance of doing it from a preservation standpoint. They all want to do modern economic development. It's expected, it's needed. But historic preservation is the way to make these places the sacred places that they were meant to be. And you don't have to short circuit the economics because you're doing the preservation. You've also got, folks just kind of don't understand the importance of our history to the American history. That's why the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund is so important, and the work of Ford and Darren and Felicia is so important, because we've got to get people to see that this is the essence of America. And when we talk about equitable development, it means that everybody gets a voice, everybody gets a chance, and everybody participates. So I just want to tell you a few things. The situation that we have here is grave. Large numbers of historic structures that could have breathed life into the preservation process and the practice of archiving and preserving our artifacts are gone. This includes our precious buildings and our landmarks that have been razed, from Small's Paradise to the Renaissance Ballroom and on and on and on. We've seen previous historic fabric destroyed and gone forever. But just as a people who have always made more from less, we will do it now. We must do the same thing with the historic fabric left in Harlem. Langston Hughes said something that I found to be very important for this meeting. He did a poem called Dreams, and he said, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for what dreams do, life is what dreams can make happen, I should say. Life is a barren field frozen with snow." Langston Hughes was talking about the dreams for these buildings in Harlem. He was talking about your dreams. And the importance is that when we consider preservation in Black America, there's the rest of Black America, and then there's Harlem, the Mecca, the epicenter, the cultural heritage fest that is all aspects of our people, whether it be those that journeyed from down south, or those who came from the islands, or those who came from Africa, or from wherever. Harlem is home to all and has been special. It is special to our history and to our heritage. And when I say our heritage, I certainly want you as the audience to know that I mean Aunt Haigie's children from the African diaspora, but I also mean the full-throated heritage of America, complete. Without us, there is no American heritage. We touch every tendril and every scintilla. I want to be respectful today of all peoples and all heritages as we lift up the artifacts and assets of Harlem and realize that we have much work to do in the neighborhoods. As we recognize and realize that many special places and structures are gone, so many are still here and still at risk. We must, and I say again, we must stop the wrecking ball. We have the tools, as I mentioned earlier, to make a real difference. Some say that it costs too much. I say that we have to figure it out and be creative. We have to use the historic tax credits, state and federal, new markets tax credits, philanthropy, corporate investment, individual donors, and adaptive reuse for today's needs. The best way to make a preservation building work is for it to serve a current need and to receive the income from those current needs. So in closing, I say to you this: throughout Harlem, throughout your entire city, you have an opportunity to galvanize people, to galvanize leadership, to make sure that folks understand that this is not just about Harlem, it's not just about African American people. It is about the history of America. It is about the essence of how preservation and the arts edify us as we build community. And I challenge you to not only meet these needs, but to understand your role as you move forward to make a difference. I challenge you to continue the work that brought you here this morning, and I challenge you to find the new ways that we will need to make a difference as we do what? Save Harlem now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. This has been quite dynamic. We had a great keynote speech by Irvin Henderson, and we thank you so much. And you have really set the pace, And so I hope that we can continue with the tenor of what you said as we start talking about really the history of Harlem. First, let me just say, welcome Harlem and friends of Harlem. It's good to see all of you here. And many of us think we know Harlem's history, but we have three wonderful people who all three happen to be friends of mine, who know so much about Harlem, and perhaps they will tell you something about Harlem that you didn't know, or some aspect of the history that they refine and draw it out so that you will know more about it. So without any further elaboration, I would like to, what we're gonna do is ask each panelist to speak, and after they speak, we'll have Q&As, and we have mics on each side of the room that you can use if you want to come up and ask a question. And then if we have time, I would like to engage the panelists in a dialogue about the subject of this panel. Our first speaker is Andrew Dolkart, who I first met, I think in the late 1990s when I had been hired as the executive director of the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association. And we were doing our house tour, and we needed to get information about the houses that were on the tour. And they just said to me, oh, just call Andrew Dolkart. I didn't know anything about, call Andrew Dolkart, here's his telephone number. And so I called him up, and he was so gracious. And for years, he became my go-to person for information about the history of houses and faith-based institutions in the Mount Morris Park community, and the historic district, and what was then in the catchment area, but wasn't quite the extension, which is now the extension. It took 44 years for it to get designated when they told people in 1973, oh, we'll come right back to it and we'll take care of it. 44 years later, in 2016, the extension of the historic district was designated. Andrew is the go-to person for all of that information, but he's more than that. He knows a lot about New York City architecture and the history, and you can read his bio. I don't want to elaborate on his bio. I just want